Hi, I'm Kelly Herbick, field agronomist in northeast Minnesota, northwest Wisconsin.
And I'm Ryan Bates, field agronomist in central Wisconsin. And today we are here in a shop looking at a planter and really talking about the importance of planter maintenance ahead of the planting season to really drive good seed to soil contact.
Right, that's right, Ryan. And why is seed to soil contact so important? It helps us get a uniform stand. For each leaf stage we fall behind, by not having plants emerge at the same time, we're just going to start to chip away at our yield potential for the season. So we're going to walk you through a few things here just to be looking at before you hit the field.
So Kelly, what's the first thing that you like to look at when looking at a planter for maintenance?
Yeah, I think we should start with a disc opener. So if you look right here, what we want to start by looking at is measuring the diameter of the disc opener, the disc itself. So we want, for this particular planter, we want to start with a disc that's 15 inches. And when we get below a half an inch of wear, so if we get below 14.5 inches, then it's time to replace the disc. So if we measure this one, we're still at that 15-inch diameter. So we're going to go ahead and leave these on. Ryan, can you show us what a worn disc would look like?
So we took this one, I actually have this one off here. But as we measure this disc, we find out that this one's right about just under 14.5, and we want to replace that because that's going to wear throughout the season as well and only get smaller in diameter. So we're going to want to go ahead and replace this with a new disc.
The other thing that we want to make sure is that we've got a good point of contact. So we want to make sure these discs aren't warped in any way. So what we tend to do is we'll take our two business cards and we'll slide them in to where they'll stop. And we want to measure the distance in between those business cards. So we're shooting for 2 inches between the business cards to help us get that true V trench. In this particular example, the discs are set too tight, and that could lead to wear on the actual disc and
really warp the disc
parts,
and wear out the bearings. So there is shims in there that you may need to put in there to get that correct spacing as well. So there is harm to being too far apart and wear too much, as well as being too tight as well.
Right. And so you don't want to just do this once, guys. You want to make sure that you rotate this and do this several times to make sure that your discs themselves aren't actually warped.
So here you can see when we take off that disc, those spacers that we can adjust how tight that is. And you really want to have that set up right. So if you got too many shims in there, you're going to get a W pattern, and it's not going to get the right V trench. If they're too tight, you're going to cause excess wear. When we take off that disc, we can also see our seed tube. And that disc I showed you earlier where we were excess wear, that's going to give me concerns about, did we cause damage to that seed tube? And that seed tube is critical because that seed's going to travel down from the meter down through that seed tube and come down and hit the bottom. And you want to look at the bottom of the seed tube. A lot of times if the discs are too wore, you're going to get a cracked seed tube or a bit of a lip at the bottom of that seed tube. This one is in good shape. But if there's a lip there, you're going to want to replace that. If you don't replace that, you're going to cause seeds to bounce as it's coming down that seed tube, and that's going to really affect your spacing, lead to doubles or skips or just overall poor spacing of that seed.
All right, so the next thing we want to take a look at are the gauge wheels and make sure that they're fitting snug up against the disc opener. So if we actually come over here and we see if there's a gap between the gauge wheel and the disc, that's going to give us the indication that these are too loose and that they're going to need to be tightened up. If you lift it up, this should be flush with the disc, and we can see that we've got a gap here. What happens is if these aren't tight to the disc, you're going to end up with soil collecting in there. That can then drop down into the seed trench. You can have dry soil then that would lead to uneven emergence or poor seed to soil contact.
The other thing we really want to look at is the meter itself, and a lot of times you want to have the meter sent in to a professional to have them go through it to make sure everything's set up. On your finger meters, you want to make sure the springs are all good to go and the brushes are good to go, and the air meter, you're going to want to make sure that the springs and everything else is set up and ready to go. A lot of that is fine details, and a professional really understands how the particular brand needs to be set up to operate effectively. So make sure you're sending your meters into a dealer or some type of certified professional that can go through that meter and make sure that thing's ready to go for the season. There's a lot of components on the planter that you really need to look at. We need to look at the fertilizer system, our startup or pop-up system that we have on. Make sure that's properly calibrated. All electronics on these planters nowadays, there's a lot of wires that have been sitting all winter long. You want to make sure the GPS and the monitors are all ready to go. That can take quite a while. Make sure you leave some time for that. Also need to look at your chains. Replace any worn chains, and a lot of times just replace the chains. They're relatively inexpensive and can have a major impact on your planter operation. We also want to look at tire pressure. So as we look at our driver wheel and our driven wheel, we want to make sure we have the correct PSI in those tires. The tire pressure in your drive wheels can cause incorrect population drops, and make sure those have the right PSI is critical. So now that we've talked about how we create that good seed trench, we need to talk about how we make sure that we close up that seed trench and get good seed to soil contact, closing that trench up. So here we're set up with a rubber closing wheel and a spike closing wheel, and there's a lot of different configurations you can go with. We're not going to go into that at the time, but make sure, depending on your setup, that you've met the recommendations that your manufacturer has set out with those. But we really want to make sure those are set up right. Make sure you're getting good seed soil contact. Make sure there's no bearings or wear and tear that's too extreme. That's going to cause you to not get that proper seed to soil contact. We also want to look at the overall row unit. Wiggle that a little bit. Make sure there's not too much slop in that row unit overall as well. Make sure those are properly set up correctly is going to lead to a good closed seed trench as well.
All right, guys, so we covered some basics of planter prep today, but we can't reiterate the importance of just how valuable taking the time to do this before you hit the field is. Just remember that for each plant that comes up delayed because of poor seed to soil contact or something that we could have controlled by making sure we took the time to get all this right, we're going to give up yield. As plants become delayed by V stage, they essentially become weeds in our field. And so for each 1,000 plants per acre that we give up, that's 5 to 7 bushels of yield that we leave on the table.
And we really want to go through the planter and understand the equipment we're working with. Make sure you consult the manufacturer and any aftermarket reference materials that are available. Each planter setup is different, and each aftermarket attachment you put on there has their own recommendations on how it needs to be set up with a particular brand of planter as well. So make sure you're consulting that and really have that thing set up for great seed to soil contact for your top end yield.
Thanks for tuning in, and remember to stay safe out there.